Hi everyone, it is Miss Mann, and I am back with Esperanza Rising, written by Pam Munoz Ryan. We left off at chapter 10, and Esperanza was just telling her mother that she is going to be the head of the family now because her mom is sick and in the hospital. Here we go. Los avocados. Esperanza's breath made smoky vapors in front of her face as she waited for the truck to take her to tie grapevines. She shifted from foot to foot and clapped her gloved hands together and wondered what was so new about the new year. It already seemed old, with the same routines. She'd worked during the week. She had helped Hortensia cook dinner in the late afternoons, and in the evening she helped Josefina with the babies and Isabel with her homework. She went to see Mama on Saturdays and Sundays. She huddled in the field near a smudge pot to keep warm and mentally counted the money she would need to bring Abuelita here. Every other week, with the small amount she saved, she bought a money order from the market and put it in her valise. She figured that if she kept working until peaches, she would have enough for Abuelita's travel. Her problem then would be how to reach Abuelita. She ached from the cold and had to keep moving all day long to stay warm. That night, as she soaked her hands in the warm water, she realized that she could no longer recognize them as her own. Cut and scarred, swollen and stiff, they looked like the hands of a very old man. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Esperanza as she watched Hortensia cut a ripe avocado in half. "Of course," said Hortensia, removing the big pit and leaving a hole in the heart of the fruit. She scooped out the pulp, mashed it on a plate, and added some more glycerin. "You have seen me make this for your mother many times. We are lucky to have the avocados this time of year. Some friends of Josefina had brought them from Los Angeles." Hortensia rubbed the avocado mixture into Esperanza's hands. "You must keep it on for 20 minutes so your hands will soak up the oils." Esperanza looked at her hands covered in the greasy green lotion and remembered when Mama used to sit like this after a long day of gardening or after horseback rides with Papa through the dry mesquite grasslands. Esperanza was surprised at the simple things she missed about Mama. She missed her way of walking into a room, graceful and regal. She missed watching her hands crocheting, her fingers moving nimbly. But most of all, she longed for the sound of Mama's strong and assured laughter. She put her hands under the faucet, rinsed off the avocado, and patted them dry. She realized that it wouldn't matter how much avocado and glycerin she had put on them, they would never look like the hands of a wealthy woman from El Rancho de los Rosas, because they were the hands of a poor campinisa. It was the end of grape time when the doctor stopped Esperanza and Miguel in the hallway of the hospital before they could reach Mama's room. "I asked the nurses to alert me when they saw you coming. I'm sorry to tell you that your mother has pneumonia." "How can that be?" said Esperanza, her hands beginning to shake as she stared at the doctor. "I thought she was getting better." "This disease, valley fever, makes the body tired and susceptible to other infections. We are treating her with medications. She is weak. And I know this is hard for you, but we would like to ask that she have no visitors for at least a month, maybe longer. We cannot take a chance that she will contract another infection from any outside germs that might be brought into the hospital." "Can I see her just for a few moments?" The doctor hesitated, then nodded and walked away. Esperanza hurried to Mama's bed and Miguel followed. Esperanza couldn't imagine not seeing her for so many weeks. "Mama," she said. Mama slowly opened her eyes and gave Esperanza the smallest smile. She was thin and frail. Her hair was strewn and bedraggled. Her face was so white that it seemed to fade into the sheets as if she would sink into the bed and disappear forever. Mama looked like a ghost herself. "The doctor said I can't come to visit for a while." Mama nodded, her eyelids slowly falling back down as if they had a burden to keep up. Esperanza felt Miguel's hand on her shoulder. "Anza, we should go," he said. But Esperanza couldn't move. She wanted to do something for Mama to help her make her feel better. She carefully rolled Mama on her side and gathered all her hair together. She brushed it and put it into a long braid. Wrapping it around Mama's head, she gently pinned it back into place. Then she helped Mama lie on her back, her hair now framing her face against the white linens, like a braided halo. she used to wear in Aguas Calientes. Esperanza bent down close to her mama's ear. Don't worry, Mama. Remember, I will take care of everything. I am working and I can pay the bills. I love you. Mama said softly, I love you too. And as Esperanza turned to leave, she heard her mama whisper, no matter what happens. You need to get away from the camp, Esperanza, said Hortensia as she handed her the grocery list and asked her to go to the market with Miguel. It is the first of spring and it is beautiful outside. I thought you and Josefina always look forward to going to the markets on Saturdays, said Esperanza. We do, but today we are helping Melina and Irene make enchiladas. Will you go for us? Esperanza knew they were trying to keep her occupied. She was tormented by Mama's absence. Papa, Abuelita, Mama, who would be next? She crawled into bed as early as possible each night, curled her body in a tight ball, and didn't move until morning. She knew Josefina and Hortensia were worried about her. She nodded to Hortensia, took the list, and went to find Miguel. Be sure to tell Miguel to go to Mr. Yokota's market, Hortensia called after her. Miguel, why must we always drive so far to shop at the Japanese market when there are other markets so much closer to Arvin? Some of the other market owners aren't as kind to Mexicans as Mr. Yokota, said Miguel. He stocks many of the things we need and he treats us like people. Well, what do you mean? Esperanza, people here think that we all Mexicans are alike. They think that we are uneducated, dirty, poor, and unskilled. It does not occur to them that many of us have been trained in professions in Mexico. Esperanza looked down at her clothes. She wore a shirtwaist dress that used to be Mama's, and before that, somebody else's. Over the dress was a man's sweater with several buttons missing, which was also too big. She leaned up and looked in the mirror. Her face was tanned from the weeks in the fields, and she had taken to wearing her hair in a long braid, like Hortensia's, because Mama had been right. It was much more practical that way. Miguel, how could anyone look at me and think I was uneducated? He smiled at her joke. The fact remains, Esperanza, that you, for instance, have a better education than most people's children in this country. But no one is likely to recognize that or take the time to learn it. Americans see us as one big brown group who are good for only manual labor. At this market, no one stares at us or treats us like outsiders or call us dirty greasers. My father says that Mr. Yokota is a very smart businessman. He is getting rich on the other people. He's getting rich on other people's bad manners. Miguel's explanation was familiar. Esperanza's contact with the Americans outside the camp had been limited to the doctor and the nurses at the hospital, but she had heard stories from others about how they were treated. There were special sections at the movie theater for Negroes and Mexicans. In town, parents did not want their children going to the same schools with Mexicans. And living away from town in the company camp did have its advantages, she had decided. The children all went to school together, white, Mexican, Japanese, Chinese, Filipino. It didn't matter to anyone because they were all poor. Sometimes she felt as if she lived in a cocoon, protected from much of the indignation. Miguel pulled the truck into the parking lot at the market. I'll meet you. I'm going to go talk to the railroad jobs with those men. Going to go talk about railroad jobs with those men gathered on the corner. Esperanza went inside. Mr. Yokota was from Tokyo, and the store had all sorts of Japanese cooking ingredients like seaweed and ginger and a fresh fish from counter with fish that still had their heads. But there were also Mexican products, too. There was a small tissue donkey that Esperanza had noticed before. It was like the one Mama had bought for her years ago. Esperanza thought it was so cute Esperanza had thought it was so cute and that she refused to break it, and even though it was filled with all sorts of sweets. Instead, she hung it in her room above her bed. A clerk walked by, and impulsively she pointed to the miniature piñata. Por favor, she said. Please? She bought the other things she needed, including another money order. That was one more benefit of Mr. Yokota's market. She could buy money orders there. She was waiting in the truck when Miguel came back. Another money order? What do you do with them all? Asked Miguel. I save them in my valise. They are They are for such small amounts, but together they'll be enough someday to bring Abuelita here. And the piñata? It's not anyone's birthday. I bought it for Mama. I'm going to ask the nurse to put it near her bed so she'll know I'm thinking of her. When we can stop by the hospital on the way back. Will you cut a hole in the top for me so I can put the caramels inside? The nurses, they can eat them. He took out the knife and made an opening in the piñata. While Miguel drove, Esperanza began feeding in the caramels. Not far down the road, they approached an almond grove, the trees flushed with gray and green leaves and white blossoms. Esperanza noticed a girl and a woman walking hand in hand, each with a grocery bag in their arm. She couldn't help but think what a nice scent it made, and with the two women framed what a nice scene it made, with the two women framed against so many spring blossoms. Esperanza recognized one of them. I think that's Marta. Miguel stopped the truck and then slowly backed up. We should give her a ride. Esperanza reluctantly nodded, remembering the last time they'd given her a lift, but she opened the door. Esperanza and Miguel. Que buena suerte. What good luck, said Marta. This is my mother, Ada. Thanks for the ride. Marta's mother had the same short, curly black hair, but hers was sprinkled with gray. Miguel got out and pulled all the groceries in the truck bed, so put all the groceries in the truck bed so they could all sit in the front. Ada said, I heard about your mother, and I've been praying for her. Esperanza was surprised and touched. Thank you. I am very grateful. Are you coming to our camp? Asked Miguel. No, said Marta. As you probably know, I'm not welcome there. We're going a mile or so up the road to the strikers' farm. We were tossed out of the migrant workers' camp and were told either to go back to work or leave. So we left. We aren't going to work under those disgusting conditions and for those pitiful wages. Ada was quiet and nodded when Marta talked about the strike. Esperanza felt a twinge of envy when she noticed that Marta never let go of her mother's hand. There are hundreds of us together at this farm, but thousands around the country, and more people join our cause every day. You are new here, but in time you'll understand what we're trying to change. Hey, turn left, she said, pointing to a dirt road rutted with tire marks. Aquí, right here, said Ada. What are the guards for? Asked Esperanza. They're for protection, said Marta. The farmer who owns the land is sympathetic to us, but a lot of people don't like strikers causing trouble. We've had threats. Men take turns at the entrance. Miguel pulled the truck to the side of the road and stopped. There were only 10 wooden toilet stalls for hundreds of people, and Esperanza could smell the effects from the truck. Some people lived in tents, but others only had burlap bags stretched between poles. Some were living in their cars or old trucks. Mattresses were on the ground where people and dogs rested. A goat was tied to a tree. There was a long pipe that lay on top of the ground and a line of water spigots sticking from it. Near each spigot were pots and pans and campfire rings and the makings of outdoor kitchens. In an irrigation ditch, women were washing clothes and children were bathing at the same time. Clotheslines ran everywhere. It was a great jumble of humanity and confusion. Esperanza could not stop looking. She felt hypnotized by the squalor, but Marta and her mother didn't seem to the least bit embarrassed. Home sweet home, said Marta. They all climbed out of the truck, but before Marta and Ada could retrieve their groceries, a Campanizo family coming from the opposite direction approached them. The children were dirty and skinny, and their mother held an infant who was crying. Do you have food so we can feed my family? Said the father. We were thrown out from our camp because I was striking. My family has not eaten in 2 days. There are too many people coming into the valley each day who will work for pennies. Yesterday I worked all day and made less than 50 cents, and I cannot buy food for one day with that. I was hoping that there with others who have been through the same. You are welcome here, said Ada. Esperanza reached into the truck bed and opened a large bag of beans. Hand me your hat, she said. The man handed over his large sun hat, and she filled it with the dried beans and gave it back. Gracias, gracias, he said. Esperanza looked at the two older children, their eyes watery and vacant. She lifted the piñata and held it out to them. They said nothing but hurried toward her, took it, and ran back to their family. Marta looked at her. Are you sure you aren't already on our side? Esperanza shook her head. They were hungry, that's all. Even if I believed in what you're doing, I must take care of my mother. Ada put her hand on Esperanza's arm and smiled. We all do what we must do. Your mother would be proud of you. Miguel handed them their bags and they walked toward the farmer's field. Before they reached the gate, Marta suddenly turned and said, I shouldn't be telling you this, but the strikers are more organized than they appear. In a few weeks, during asparagus, things are going to happen all over the country. We're going to shut down everything, the fields, the sheds, the railroad. If you have not joined us by then, be very careful. Then she hurried to catch up with her mother. Do you think they're right? Esperanza asked. I don't know, said Miguel. But what the man said is true. I have heard that there will be 10 times the people here looking for jobs. But until then, with so many joining the strikes, I might be able to get a job at the railroad. Esperanza's mind wrestled with Miguel's words. For him, the strike was an opportunity to work at the job he loved and to make it in his own country, in this country. But for her, it was a threat to her finances, Abuelita's arrival, and Mama's recuperation. Then there was the matter of her own safety. She thought of Mama and Abuelita, and she knew there was only one thing for her to do. What's the occasion? Asked Esperanza. I got a job at the machine shop at the railroad. Oh, Miguel, that's great news. So many of the railroad workers have joined the strikers, and I know it might be temporary, but if I do a good job, maybe they'll keep me. That is right, said Alfonso. You do a good job at work, you do great work. They'll see it. They will keep you. Esperanza sat down and listened to Miguel tell the others about the job, but she wasn't hearing his words. She was seeing his eyes, dancing like Papa's when he used to talk about the land. She watched Miguel's animated face, thinking that at last his dream was coming true. Hi, everyone. It is Miss Mann, your Learning Center Specialist. We're continuing with Chapter 12, Los Asparagus. We have 3 chapters left. Just thought I'd give you that info and give you a different view of the Learning Center, a much better view, at least a better background. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. Marta was right. The strikers were more organized than ever. They handed out flyers in front of every store. They painted sides of old barns with their slogans and held meetings at the farm. Esperanza got on the flatbed truck with Hortensia and Josefina for the first day of packing. The company had sent a man with the gun to ride on the truck with them for protection, they said, but the gun frightened Esperanza. When they arrived at the sheds, a crowd of women interrupted into shouting and booing. They carried signs that said, Huelga, strike. Among them were Marta and her friends, and they were yelling, Help us feed our children! We must all join together if we are to all eat! Save your countrymen from starving! When Esperanza saw their menacing faces, she wanted to run back to the safety of the camp, do laundry, clean diapers, anything but this. She wanted to tell them that she didn't want anyone's children to starve, but she knew it wouldn't matter. The strikers only listened if you agreed with them. She reached for Hortensia's hand and pulled her close. Josefina marched toward the shed, looking straight ahead. Hortensia and Esperanza stayed close behind, never letting go of each other. One of the women from their camp called out, We make less money packing asparagus than you do when you pick cotton. Leave us alone. Our children are hungry too. When the guard wasn't looking, one of the strikers picked up a rock and threw it at the woman, barely missing her head, and the workers all hurried towards the shed. The strikers stayed near the road, but Esperanza's heart was still beating wildly as she and the women took their places to pack the asparagus. That night at dinner, Alfonso and Juan told how they had the same problems in the fields. Strikers waited for them, and they had to cross the picket lines to get to work. Once in the fields, they were safe, protected by guards the company had sent. But the logs of asparagus that were sent back to the sheds had been taken across the picket lines, and strikers often slipped surprises beneath the harvest. The strike continued for days. One afternoon, as Josefina took a handful of asparagus from the crate, a large rat jumped out at her. A few days later, Esperanza heard a terrible scream from one of the women, and several writhing gopher snakes slithered out of the crate. They found razor blades and shards of glass in the field bins, and the women, usually efficient and quick to unpack the asparagus, slowed down and were hesitant to grab the vegetables from their boxes. When several of them heard when several of them heard a rattling beneath the pile of stalks, the supervisors took the entire crate out of the yard, dumped it, and found an angry rattlesnake inside. It was a miracle that no one was bitten by that snake, said Hortensia that night at dinner. They were all gathered around in one cabin, eating meatball soup. Did you see it? Asked Isabel. Yes, said Esperanza. We all saw it. It was frightening, but the supervisor cut its head off with a hoe. Isabel cringed. Can't they do anything to the strikers? Asked Hortensia. It's a free country, said Miguel. And besides, strikers are careful. As long as they stay near the roads and the guards don't actually see them do anything aggressive, then no, there's not much that anyone can do. It's the same at the railroad. I pass the picket lines every day and listen to the yelling and the insults. It's the yelling all day long that bothers me, said Hortensia. Remember, do not respond to them, said Alfonso. Things will get better. Papa, said Miguel, things will get worse. Have you seen the cars and trucks coming through in the pass in the mountains? Every day, more and more people. Some of them say they will pick cotton for 5 or 6 cents a pound and will pick produce for less. People cannot survive on such low wages. Where will it end? Said Josefina. Everyone will starve if people work for less and less money. That is the striker's point, said Esperanza. No one said anything. Forks clinked on the plates. Pepe, who was sitting in Esperanza's lap, dropped a meatball on the floor. Are we going to starve? Asked Isabel. No, mija, said Josefina. How could anyone starve here with so much food around us? Esperanza had grown so accustomed to the striking chance while she packed asparagus that the moment it stopped, she looked up from her work as if something were wrong. Hortensia, do you hear that? What? The silence. There is no more yelling. The other women on the line looked at each other. They couldn't see the street from where they stood, so they moved to the other end of the shed, cautiously looking out where the other strikers usually stood. In the distance, a caravan of gray buses and police cars headed fast toward the shed, dust flying in their wakes. Immigration, said Josefina. It's a sweep. The women in the packing shed huddled together, protected by the company's guard. What about us? Said Esperanza. I cannot leave Mama. Hortensia heard the panic in her voice. No, no, Esperanza, they are not here for us. The growers need workers. That's why the company guards us. Several immigration officials, accompanied by police, began searching the platform, turning over boxes and dumping out field bins. Finding no strikers on the dock, they jumped back down and hurried to where the crowd was being loaded onto the buses. Americana, Americana, yelled one woman, and she began to unfold some papers. One of the officials took the papers from her hand and tore them into pieces. Get on the bus, he ordered. What will they do with them? Asked Esperanza. They will take them to Los Angeles, put them on a train to El Paso, Texas, and then to Mexico, said Josefina. But some of them are citizens, said Esperanza. It doesn't matter. They are causing problems for the government. They're talking about forming a farm workers union, and the government and the growers don't like that. Well, what about their families? How will they know? Well, word gets out. It is sad. They leave the buses parked at the station until late at night with those captured on board. Families don't want to be separated from their loved ones and usually go with them. That is the idea. They call it a voluntary deportation, but it's not much of a choice. Two immigration officials positioned themselves in front of the shed. The others left on the buses. Esperanza and the other women watched the despondent faces in the windows disappear. Slowly the women reassembled the line and began to pack again. It had lasted all only just a few minutes. Well, what happens now? Asked Esperanza. La Migra will help keep their eyes open for any strikers that may come back, said Josefina, nodding toward the two men stationed nearby. And we go back to work and feel thankful it is not us on the bus. Esperanza took a deep breath and went back to her spot. She was relieved, but still imagined the anguish of the strikers. Troubled thoughts stayed in her mind. Something seemed very wrong about sending people away from their free country because they had spoken their minds. She noticed she needed more bands to wrap around the asparagus bundles and walked to the back of the dock to get them. As she bent down to set one straight, she sucked in her breath, startled by what was in front of her. Marta was huddled in a corner, holding her fingers to her lips and her eyes begging for help. She whispered, "Please, Esperanza, don't tell. I can't get caught. I must take care of my mother." Esperanza stood frozen for a moment, remembering Marta's meanness the first day in the truck. If she helped her, if she helped her and someone found out, Esperanza would be next on the bus. She couldn't risk it and started to say no, but then she thought about Marta and her mother holding hands and couldn't imagine that being them being separated from each other. And besides, they were both citizens. They had every right to be here. She turned around and headed back to where the others were working. No one had paid any attention to her. All the bus, oh, they were all busy talking about the sweep. She picked up a bundle of asparagus, several burlap sacks from the sack, and a dirty apron that someone had left from the hook. She quietly wandered back to Marta's hiding place. La migra, La migra is still out front, she said in a hushed voice. They will probably leave in an hour when the shed closes. She handed the apron and the asparagus to Martha. When you leave, put on the apron and carry the asparagus so you look like a worker, just in case anyone stops you. Gracias, whispered Martha. I am sorry I misjudged you. Shh, said Esperanza, repositioning the cases and draping the burlap sacks across their tops so Marta couldn't be seen. Esperanza, called Josefina. Where are you? We need those rubber bands. Esperanza stuck her head around the corner and saw Josefina with her hands on her hips, waiting. Coming, she called. She grabbed a bundle of bands and went back to work as if nothing had happened. Esperanza laid in bed that night and listened to the others in the front room talk about the sweeps and the deportations. They went to every major grower and put hundreds of strikers on the buses, said one. Some say that they did it to create more jobs for those coming from the east, said Josefina. We are lucky the company needs us right now. If they didn't, we could be next. We've been loyal to the company and the company will be loyal to us, said Alfonso. I'm just glad it's over, said Hortensia. It is not over, said Miguel. In time, they will be back, especially if they have families here. They will reorganize and they'll be stronger. There will come when a time when we have to decide all over again whether we join them or not. How was it that in Mexico they could send people? How was it that in the United States they could send people to Mexico who had never even lived there? She couldn't stop thinking about Marta. It didn't matter if Esperanza agreed with her cause or not. No one should be separated from her family. Had Marta made her way back to the striker's farm without getting caught? Had she found her mother? For some reason, Esperanza had to know. The next morning, she begged Miguel to drive her to the farm. The field was still surrounded by the chain link fence, but no one was protecting the entrance this time. All the evidence of the people that she had seen was before was there, but not one person was to be seen. It was quiet and desolate, except for the goat still tied to the tree, bleeding for freedom. Immigration's been here too, said Miguel. He got out of the truck, walked over to the tree, and untied the goat. More than anything, Esperanza hoped that Marta and her mother were together, but now there may be no way for her to find out. Maybe Marta's aunt would know eventually. Something colorful caught her eye. Dangling from a tree branch were the remnants of a little donkey piñata that she had given to the children. Its tissue streamers fluttered in the breeze. It had been beaten with a stick, its insides tore out.